Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My guest in this episode is Cuban drummer, composer, author Dafnis Prieto, who since coming to New York City has worked with many of the great artists of our time, people such as Eddie Palmieri, Dave Samuels, Michel Camilo, and many, many others. Here is Dafnis Prieto. Dafnis, so nice of you to be on here. It's great to see you. Please, before we start talking about shaping your journey, the first thing I'm going to ask you is what started it for you? Like, we all have a story as to like the very beginning, that first spark, where it all began and how.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to see you after a while. It's a great pleasure to have this talk with you. Where did I start and how did I start, meaning that first steps? I was born and raised in a very musical neighborhood in Santa Clara, Cuba.
Yes.
It was a very musical neighborhood, and I started listening to rumba, and the comparsas used to actually rehearse just in the corner of my house. They used to parade right in front of my house, and my mom used to get really nervous because she knew I was going to get out. And I was like 7 or 8 years old already. But my first instrument was actually the guitar. I started playing guitar and sing Cuban songs. That was my first approach to a musical instrument and to that path. I listened to a lot of music. I started getting a feel and understanding in a very intuitive level about how music works. Then after that, my mom saw that, I was really into it. And then I asked her, to get some kind of classes. And as I mentioned, I was taking guitar lessons. So I went to a Casa de la Cultura, which is House of Culture, the translation in a way, in Santa Clara. And there it was, I guess, a group of 6 or 7 students taking these guitar lessons, which it was related to Cuban music, but also to some classical pieces and things like that, very like Baroque, easy, things for the guitar for beginners. At that moment, after a year or so, the director, the professor, wanted to make a Cuban band out of the 6 or 7 of us. Each of us has to pick a different instrument because it were going to be only 6 guitars playing Cuban music. So at that moment, one pick up the bass, or the other one's the tres, or the other ones I want to sing and play the maracas. So I picked up the bongos. And at that moment was a kind of a deviation from the guitar all along after that, because during that period we were rehearsing, and then in one of the presentations I started playing the martillo, the bongo pattern, and then imitating the rhythm of the clave with my mouse. So when the teacher saw me doing that, immediately went to my mom. I said, forget about the guitar. He needs to be in percussion. And therefore, after that, I went, when I was 10 years old, to the Fine School of Arts in Santa Clara, Cuba. And that's how I started my formal training, in a way, in percussion.
Interesting that you started on guitar. Piloto also is a guitar player. That's how he composes as well, which is very interesting. What a lot of people outside Cuba may not realize is in Cuba, you have the classical training is like there in Europe. So all the conservatories teach all the classical, plus you have all the traditional music of Cuba going on at the same time. So, I mean, talk about you're bathing in that music all the time, which is incredible. How far is Santa Clara from Moron or Cayo Coco?
It's about probably 300 kilometers or something like that. I have actually family in Moron.
Okay.
I have family there. My cousin is there with my aunts. Yeah, I've been there.
Interesting, because when we started our project in Cuba, it was in Cayo Coco at the
Is
El
that right?
Sena. It was the first Canadian hotel in Cuba,
I see.
in Cayo Coco, El Senador. So
Oh, I see.
we started a festival, the jazz festival there, tied to the hotel. We did that for 3 years, and we were inviting all the great Cuban artists there. And so I got to know everybody in Moron, because most of the people working there were from Moron.
Right.
Beautiful place, and there's so much music going on. Everybody became like family. And then before moving the whole project to Havana, as you
I
know.
see. Yeah.
But then from there, Santa Clara, did you move to Havana from there, or how long did you stay?
Yeah. I did 4 years of training in the Fine School of Arts that I mentioned, and then after that, after those 4 years, I went to the National School of Music in Havana. That's where I started when I was 14. I went to Havana, and there I continued my studies there. I mean, my studies were a lot of things. Not only what it was given to me in the school, but also what I really wanted to learn, which it became with time bigger and more profound, because it was done by my own research and investigations and willpower of really getting the knowledge and really understanding what I aiming to where I really wanted to go. And yeah, because in the school, as you mentioned, most of the training was classically, especially at that time. We didn't receive that much of a even knowledge of Cuban music per se, or and much less of any other kind of music.
Yeah, and now of course that's different now, because they mix the classical with, and they have teaching in all the conservatories, the Cuban music and everything. So it's like from the street, from the training, from everything. Now that's a bigger picture now, which is nice.
Yeah, at that time, we kind of learned Cuban music or any other kind of music on the side.
But you're always composing, because I mean, you've done a lot of composing. I mean, you do a lot of drumming, of course, but that's your main thing. But early on, I remember once you handed me a piece written, I being a percussionist also, you gave me a piece for bongos, and that you had composed a percussion piece. So you've been doing this for a very long time, right? And composing?
Yeah, since my latest period in La ENA, in National School of Music in Cuba, I start feeling, this wave of writing and conceiving and creating, and I wrote a few pieces back then for percussion. Then I wrote a couple pieces for my own recital graduation, which involved also a full band with four horns and bass and piano and drums. And then after that, I just keep committed to it. It's something is a world that I really enjoyed, and I've been involved for many years already, and I just feel kind of equally, gravitating towards drumming one side, but also my creative realm of that is not only drumming, but composing and writing books and these sort of things.
And at some point, I mean, Havana it was like a real, that's the big central in Cuba, of course, where everyone is there. Was Roberto Concepcion the percussion teacher at the time?
Yeah, he was my teacher.
Ah, okay.
For one of a couple of years, but despite the fact that we met at the school, he was teaching me xylophone and snare, and I had a great bond with him as a friendship, and I continue having that. Every time that I go to Cuba, I go and visit him. I go and we go together some place to eat or to chat, or I go to his place to have coffee and enjoy his company, and just it became a great friend of mine, and it still is. It's still active, and I talk to him.
Yeah,
You know,
he's a great guy. I remember you just made me think of when I released my book, Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set, and I was presenting it in Cuba, and he took me aside after the first printing of this because I was all excited. I put this book out. I finally, because it takes a long time, as we know, to write a book. And he took me aside, and I had known Roberto for a long time. And of course, he's the Grand Master of Cuba. And he looks at me and he says, we're walking along, and he puts his arm on mine and he says, Aldo, that was great. I looked at your book. It's really well done, really well thought out, really planned out well. But there's only one thing. You called them congas.
Oh, yeah.
So you know what I mean. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I did. And then I said, well, I now have a reason for that. I didn't do it on purpose. I said, the rest of the world doesn't know these instruments as tumbadoras. So if I call them tumbadora, nobody would understand. But I said, I see your point, and I promise you the next printing from here on in, I have to change. I have to think of something. So eventually, in the first page, I said, every time you see conga here, conga is a rhythm. As we know, in Santiago, conga compasa, conga francesa, and all of that. But we're not going to change the rest of the world. But we can say is specify that when you see conga here, it's really tumbadora.
It's on the context of the instruments.
Yes, so it's a complex thing because, as you know, some of the wording, even the names of rhythms can be really not complicated, but very confusing because people don't understand. When you say rumba, when we grew up outside of Cuba, a rumba was really something else. And then when you realize rumba was that, so all my life I've been thinking rumba is this don ton ton. That was rumba to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, there is indeed a lot of those cases where even the terminology of 3/2 and 2/3 was not even created in Cuba, and because of that, many people in Cuba has to actually adapt kind of the ripple effect that came into Cuba from outside. I remember some percussionists, asking me, what is 3/2 and 2/3? And they, this is really great established percussionists that are playing this rhythm since day one. And they've been, dealing with it, and they don't even know that terminology. And at some point, I start thinking that, well, yeah, this, we didn't have that because everybody understood. But then when you have to explain it, especially to people that are foreigners, that come from a different culture, then somehow it needs to be an explanation of how the rhythm works and what is in it and in relationship to other rhythms and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's the same thing with that kind of, terminologies of different instruments or rhythms and things like that. The same with congas. When I came out of Cuba, I was like at 17, the first time, 17 or 18 years old. And yeah, everybody's like, oh yeah, you play you play in congas or you play drums. Like, congas? What do you mean? It was really interesting because in a way I realized that the majority of the people outside my world or the world that we were living, that was actually the world that created those rhythms and those instruments, didn't know anything about it. What the way it was seen and it was observed and it was classified and it was organized in a way outside of Cuba.
Right. Interesting. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I actually wrote that book, because doing the bringing people to Cuba, those groups, those workshops that we would do, people coming from all over the world to study with the Cuban masters, that was the whole idea. During La Fiesta del Tambor, we had a whole intensive week. We still do it. And then I would realize that anytime I would be facilitating, and anytime a question would come up, I would see Changuito or Del Gonzalez or anybody look at me first and then answer the question. And I'm realizing that they're not able to, I mean, the Cuban masters, the guys, the artists, are not able to answer the question. But then I'm realizing that that's not the problem. The problem is it's the wrong question, you know, and the way it's phrased. So I decided then, since I had spent so much time analyzing all of this, I said, I'm going to try an experiment. And it was a class with Adele Gonzalez. I said, Adele, before your class, this workshop we're going to do this afternoon, let me just introduce the concept of clave, just to get certain questions out of the way already. And so I did. And then Adele comes up to me afterwards. He said, Aldo, I learned so much from your presentation. You should do that all the time. And I looked at him, Adele, please don't do that to me. But this, you know. No, he said, I did not know how to frame that for them. And I realized, of course. And that was the biggest problem. What you were just saying is, if you don't know like how to explain it in terms, in the terminology, but also in the concept of how we perceive it. And sometimes I would say to people, you know, the clave, we say 2, 3, 3, 2, but you know, it's really the melody, tension, release, and that could be anything. So it's really about melody that we're talking about. And then explain, you don't decide to play a song in 2, 3 or 3, 2. Well, if the melody is such, well, you have no choice. That is the melody. Yeah. And then aside from that is, once you know the melody, well, you know what it is. And clave wasn't invented in Cuba. It's just more complex here because everything is related, much more than in other musics and other cultures. But also, just the concept of, is it 2 bars, is it 1 bar? Well, it's all a reference. Again, getting back to the melody.
It is relative, especially because, and this is something else also, when I travel outside of Cuba, I saw most of the charts that were written by other people about Cuban music or Latin music, if you say. They were, you know, basically in 2-bar phrase, and versus most of the information that I got in Cuba, it was subdivided in 16 notes, so it was only a 1 bar in 4/4, right, of 1 bar clave. Yes. And still now, to my students, I have to explain that to them because it's just a small difference, but it makes a huge thing, especially from the writing perspective and from the conceiving perspective. That I don't like to make things absolute. I say, you know, if you like it this way, or if you think the song needs this kind of subdivision, in this case, 2 bar will mean that the subdivision is in 8 notes. And then, you know, in a 1 bar, that will mean that it's in 16 notes, as most of the people do it in Cuba. The whole point is to be able to write and the closest as you want the music to be felt. And that's so that you don't have to make that much of an explanation right. of it, you know, when you give the music to the musicians. But yeah, those are the discrepancies. The thing is that because the media and because of the power, it is not of the promotion and the ability to let people know about this. It doesn't necessarily comes from Cuba. So therefore, many people already think, oh, it's a 2-bar pattern. And that's it. And they put it in the shelf as a box, like it's a 2-bar pattern. It's like, no, they trying to go to the absolute and to the certainty that this is the way it is. And it's not only one way. And it's important always to clarify that to students and people that are interested in this kind of music, because it could be either way. And especially in Cuba, we use most of the time the 16 notes of division with one bar clave.
That's right. And the other thing, too, is, I mean, the clave as a concept, even though it might not be called clave, is universal. I mean, most music's claves, whether it's Beethoven, whether it's jazz, whether there's a clave in the melody. So, end of story. In Cuba, they just took it to a whole other level because of having invented these instruments and these other rhythms. Then they mix, and you have the different lineages, of course, and Cuba being a musical continent, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm discovering things still there, and it's kind of infinite. It's an incredible thing. And as you go along, you say, you would need like 3 lifetimes to even understand it. But just the idea of the clave, it's not just a Cuban thing. Like, it's a universal thing, and what do they do with it in Cuba is a whole other thing, which is interesting. Goes much deeper. Of course, we could spend days on just that, but sorry. I just find it fascinating, and sometimes when I do workshops or clinics, I have to say that sometimes just quickly, and I say, for that we're going to need another week, but just think about this, and someday we'll get back to that, because that's a big subject. This is not going to be, you can't solve it. You can spend the rest of your life trying to understand it, which is good.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you were in Havana, I mean, of course, playing in Havana, there's so much going on and so much opportunity to play with different people, different contexts. What made you decide at some point, what happened that you moved to the States, to New York, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a long story. That would be probably a few weeks talking, but I'm just going to kind of, contract all of that into a nutshell in a way. I decided in 93 or something like that, or 95, to go, one of the trips to go, I went to Spain, and I decided I was going to stay there. So not to come back again to live in Cuba. I was living in Cuba basically as a tourist, in a sense that I was paying a rent in Havana. I was really spending all the money that I did overseas, bringing it to Havana and then spend it there, and then counting the days of the next time that I had to actually go out again to make more money. And I say, why should I do that? I mean, I might as well just live in a place where I make the money. I don't have to come back anywhere. So I did, and I went to Barcelona. At that time, I was already connected with Jane Bunnett, a woman sax player from Canada, and she invited me to do a tour in Canada and the US. So I did. And then after the tour, I was basically denied to go back to the Schengen community, the visa, for a year. For whatever reasons. There are not really, logical reasons behind, but just, the corporation reason of choosing randomly who is or who it isn't. And then I was stuck in Canada. And then many of my friends, they told me, man, you have to go to New York for what you really want to play, for what, your dreams and what you really want to do. I was very skeptical because I actually went, I have been already in New York at that time a couple times, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the US at all. And to me, the way I was, my mentality and my way of being and so on, it resonated a little bit more with Europe at that time. So it was almost like destiny was pushing me to go to that place that I didn't want to go, but I needed to. And in 99, I put, I went to New York, and that's that. I started playing around with so many different people. I already knew a few musicians, and I called them up, and I started going to jam sessions and, exposing myself. letting people know that I was around, and yeah, that was it. In that sense of how I end up being in New York.
And then you started working with people like Eddie Palmieri and
Yeah, I
Dave
mean, the
Samuels.
interesting thing about it, all of this, is that I wasn't really looking for any particular scene. To me, the scene is music, and I'm not going with a flag. I'm a representing of Cuban culture, or this is what I do, or this is where I come from. Yeah, those are very valuable, things to have, and nothing to neglect. But I was also very interested in other kind of music, so I started playing a lot with Steve Coleman, for example, which is a complete different mindset, including within the jazz kind of sound and context. So basically, like contemporary modern, uh, you know, music like Steve Coleman or Henry Threadgill or Andrew Hill, but then on the other side, people that were doing more kind of Latin kind of approach to music, like Eddie Palmieri or Michel Camilo, for example, or the Caribbean Jazz Project, or so on, so many other things. So my points on this is that something that really helped me at that time, it was to have a wide range of of of, of possibilities of what I was capable of doing, musically speaking, and that really helped me to balance, because I didn't really want to do only one thing, and at the end of the run, all of that experience really inspired me and gave me food for thought, in a way, and and start affecting me in a good way, influence me to become much more aware of the music that I was going to write myself also. And so that was basically how kind of all happened.
And then the big band, because you started doing a lot more big band stuff later on that you're still doing. Which I'm looking around and I'm saying, like, this whole big band thing, we would think that it would die down just because of economics or space or whatever reasons. But I'm seeing the big band idea expanding. Actually, isn't that interesting? And people like you, I mean, and many others are coming up with big bands all over the place, which is, I think, is fantastic in many ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you get into this zone of I need to do this regardless, and then you take the regardless, away, and then you just do it. In that case, I had already written big band music as commissioned by two other people. Especially, I did two commissions for the Arturo Farrell big band. And the first one was commissioned by the Lincoln Center. This is back in 2000 and before 2010 or so, or around that time. So yeah, and that was kind of, so I had a few songs already for the big band, and I say, well, might as well just do the whole album the way I wanted to do it, and with me playing the drum set, which is a different thing. You commission someone else, they play the music. And, it sounds great and everything, but it's different always the way you're going to end up playing it yourself, from the point of view of you're the one that conceived that. And therefore, that was basically how I end up doing the Big Bang album. I still actually have a whole repertoire of new music that hasn't been recorded for Big Band. And hopefully one day I have the possibility to put together the big band again, and put out this new music.
Right. Yeah. And also one thing that is interesting, I have one or two of your books which I found super interesting. But you've been writing a lot of books also, which is nice. And explaining concepts and rhythmic concepts. I think that's important, because some people learn about a culture, about rhythms, but not rhythm concept or how to deal with rhythm on a larger sense, you know, because now we're talking Africa, we're talking India, we're talking about Western traditional music, and then subcultures, the derivatives from Africa, like Cuba, like not all Cuba, because some of it is European, some of it is African, the Afro-Cuban side, and then you have Brazil and all of these things. So having a middle ground that helps understand really great. And that's, I can't remember what the name of that book was that you had given me once.
Yeah, well, the first book that I published came out in 2015. It was called A World of Rhythmic Possibilities.
Yes, that's the one.
And then that's the first book. That's a thick book. It's very analytical, very conceptual and philosophical in a way. And plus instructional. I mean, it has some instruction, some exercise, a lot of technique stuff to practice and things like that. And then the second book is called Rhythmic Synchronicity, which is a book that I wrote for non-drummers to improve their rhythmic skills. And this is a course that I teach. I currently teach at the Frost School of Music here at the University of Miami. And then the third book, which just came out, is my third book. It's called What Are the Odds? I actually let me show you the cover of it. This is the book.
What are the odds? Nice.
And it's a book on Latin rhythms. These rhythms right here, basically. You have Guaguancó, Bembe, Partido Alto. It's back 6/8 by Big Songo and Abacua, Merengue and Columbia and Bomba. These 9 rhythms, and each of them I developed them into different meters, and kind of, you know, create a journey in each of them through different kind of meters, and how you can, you know, apply them to the drum set and relate that information into the music settings. You know?
Beautiful. I mean, there's so much always to learn. I remember once you just sparked a memory here. When I was studying in Cuba with different people, I was studying Bata a little bit, and I would go see people just to learn. And a friend of mine once said, you have to go and see this group. There are Chinese descendants in the barrio. I forget what it is, but they're called Los Chinitos. Are you aware of them? Los Chinitos?
But you mean the rumba band?
Yeah,
no. Because there was a Chinitos, which were, I think, 2 brothers. One played bass, and the other one I'm not really sure. But anyways, and they had just a, you know, like kind of a fusion Cuban funk kind of thing. It was a band, meaning, you know, with other instruments more than just percussion and voice, you know.
No,
but
this one,
if you're talking about Los Chinitos, meaning the ones that create the guarapachangueo.
Exactly, that's the one.
That's a rumba. Yes. Okay. So yeah, of course, I know the work through Pancho Quinto, because I did a lot of touring, and it was a great friend of mine, Pancho Quinto, and I learned so much from him. And he introduced me because Pancho was kind of a part of that scene of guarapachangueo and the development of all of that, and he introduced me to Los Chinitos, which, you know, were kind of the pioneers, the first people that started developing the guarapachangueo, which is a sub-genre within the rumba, especially guaguancó.
Yes. Very, very interesting. And I mean, when I went to their house, it was South Havana. It was almost like being in Africa. Almost, I'd never seen anything like it. It was fantastic watching them work all day long, and we'd spend hours. Mm-hmm. And of course, at one point, you know, I'm not used to playing 3 hours of these cajones, and they looked at me and says, "But you're a professional guy. You should be able to do that." I said, "Well, I don't know, but I'm not sure 3 hours or 4 hours in that heat, and it would be like 40 degrees Celsius." But I mean, I learned so much from them, not just about the rhythms, but also the approach to these things. And and how much variety there can be once you understand once you have that, like, your tools of how to learn something. I mean, I think that's important. And so
Yeah,
like,
I mean, Cuba is such a deep source of information, and every musical information relates so much with the spiritual realm as well. It's just not just music for entertainment.
right.
It's music really that comes from the soul and from your spirit and from your emotions, from your state of being, and it goes out. And that search, that philosophy, in a way that the great musicians they carry with them all the time. I mean, music comes with the philosophy, comes with the belief, and it comes with the critical thinking. That is not only acceptance, is organization, is asking a lot of questions, and therefore out of that, you make a decision to which path you're going to make or not. But I think this is one of the biggest things that I learned from the culture that I come from. That is such a related device, music, in a way of how we live, and it's expression of our culture. It's not an imposition of markets or
Right.
or some kind of, like, and anyways, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah, nice. And I'm glad you're bringing out these books, because it really helps people understand who may not have the opportunity to go and stay there. I've been going for over 22 years, so I'm super comfortable. I'm always discovering something, and I'm always fascinated. And I sit down, and I remember once going to Piloto's house and as I'm approaching, around the corner was these people playing rhythms that I had never heard in Cuba. And so before going to this house, I went, and I'm standing in the window, and people are waving me in. And so I go in, and I'm looking at this, and these are not like the Cuban things I'm hearing, because I had also studied African drumming, West African drumming.
Right.
And I'm listening to this, and I'm saying, that's something else. That's Ivory Coast rhythms such as diba. So I went to Piloto, and I said, Piloto, you have to explain this to me. I just heard down the street this group jamming, playing all night, and it was like a big feast. And they were playing this, so I played for him. He says, "Oh, that's I think he called it some palo or something else. I'm not sure." I said, "But yeah." So in the Ivory Coast, that's exactly digba. And I said, that's fascinating, and nobody talks about this. They were like, it was like right in front of me, and they've been doing this for how long?
Yeah, that's the Bantu influence that we got in Cuba, palo, which a lot of palo was a very interesting thing, because it really influenced a lot of other genres per se, but nobody really talks about it.
Interesting.
But yeah, it is there. It is there.
But it was interesting for me that I'm walking. It was as if this is just another thing going on, and I'm making it a big deal because I'm here in Cuba, but I'm hearing Africa, like not just the bata religious music, something else. And I've been doing these festivals, these workshops for years, and this is the first time, and it's no big deal, and it's just normal. Oh yes, and that's. Wow. I mean, someone like me who gets curious, you go crazy. I'm like a madman. I'm saying, yes, but...
The thing is, in Cuba,
beautiful.
If we put everything in perspective, we had at least like 6 or 7 different cultures from Africa that came. From Yoruba all the way to like Bantu and Palo and, Arara and so on and so forth. Now we also have, all the Spaniards, influence. We have French influence. We have Italian influence, and all of that is kind of like becomes, intertwined in a way. And one affects or inspire the other, or influence the other, and yeah, that's it's really a fantastic thing to experience, because you constantly listening to things that are completely new, that you are unaware, and it's fascinating to know, because all of those cultures, they came with their own languages and their own beliefs,
of course,
and their own behavior and way of, and thank God none of that was taken away from. I mean, I always say that slavery is not it was never a good thing, and nothing really positive can come out of that. But we were in Cuba, we were lucky that the instruments were not taken away like it happened in the U.S., for example.
Right.
And we were able to preserve many of the instruments, most of the language, and the culture, and survive, all of that struggle of colonialism and selection of what it was allowed or not. But yeah, that was a different degree of for the Spaniards to deal with the slavery, and I always look at that because I live now in the U.S. and it's a complete different.
Yes,
it's a complete different relationship or consequence out of it culturally that really has affected even the psyche of people.
Sure. And the thing too is there's a bigger concentration in Cuba, so it's more homogeneous in the sense that you keep these cultures, you keep these traditions, and it's okay. And they're not diluted very quickly or become threatening or, on any level. And so that's the wonderful thing, and you're always discovering. And in some ways it keeps us interested and curious. I just recently, I was doing a tour with Omar Sosa, the pianist, and it was a trio tour. Omar Sosa being the great piano player, and he's so open to all kinds of things, and I had no idea he was originally a percussionist, but now he's a great, as you know, great pianist. And the third person was from Senegal, Sekou. He's a great singer and choral player, double. Amazing, and they would just go into things. I learned the repertoire that they needed for the tour. But then all of a sudden on stage, they would do other things. And then I would turn to them and I would, after the concert, I was just beginning the tour, and I'd saying, Omar, I don't think I ever saw that one before. He says, oh, that was his idea. Drawing on traditions. And fortunately, I knew something about each one of those things that it rang a bell. So it was not totally foreign. And then he would look at me and he'd say, you know enough about this stuff. Just jump in, It's not like this is the way it is.
Yeah.
I said, of course. I was just trying to be there for to do the gig, to be what they needed. But then they said, no, we want you to do what you do. And then I started throwing in things even from Calabria. And then, I see them smiling and I say, now I really get it. You spend all your life and you say, now I get it. But then now I really get it.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's beautiful. But now you're teaching at the university, which still allows you to do your writing, performing, but also now sharing with a lot of other people who come to you because you're in university, come to you for knowledge, they come for a degree, for all of that. But it's nice being in that position to be able to share it in an official environment.
Yeah, I enjoy education, especially because I feel level of commitment of really passing the information the way I think is closer to the truth of what I believe, and I had 20 years already of teaching. I taught
20. Wow.
10 years at NYU,
Okay.
at the University of New York, and now I've been 10 years at the Frost School of Music at University of Miami. And at the beginning, I always say that this was not part of my dream. My dream was really to be a musician and a creative person. The educational thing became kind of, on the side, and also I start feeling that a lot of young people wanted to take lessons with me, either because they like the way I play or they want to get to know more, the rhythms that I can provide them independently of my own style. And I felt that kind of responsibility in a way to give them the best possible information so they can move on in their own life. And therefore, and then you, as a consequence, I've reading 3 books already and essays and things about what I teach and so on.
Right. Was that like moving from New York to Florida to Miami? Was that a natural thing, or did you move to Miami because of the university, or vice versa?
It was especially because of that. I was, it's not all. At least in my case, it's never really only one thing. It's just a combinations of many things. In New York, I wasn't really playing locally anymore. And the only thing that I was doing a teaching, I came to Frost School of Music to do a residency for a week. And then I talked to the chair in the jazz department, and he said, well, anytime you want to come here, you'll be more than welcome. And nice. And that really, kind of ring a bell. And I say, well, maybe it's about time to just make a move in my life. And I still don't, play locally, but I do.
Right.
I do the teaching here, and then I travel a lot, and with my projects and a few other side projects that I still do.
And you also were a winner of was that a NEA grant? What's that called? A few years back. The
MacArthur.
The MacArthur, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a MacArthur grants in a way. Yeah, that was in 2011.
Right. No, I remember hearing about that, and I said, "That's brilliant." What's the grant? The prize actually called? Was it a Genius Award?
Yeah, it's a Genius Award.
Yes.
I'm just a little bit, humbled to talk about geniuses when I talk about myself. This is kind of a
let me say it. Let me say it. You are, I mean, you're brilliant, and you're not only in the performance and being able to play so beautifully, and the whole clave thing, and of course as a drummer, and it's always nice and interesting to see, but also taking it further in the academic context, but also in the real context, and being a creative, being a creative mind that creates things, but for the purpose of sharing. To me, that's important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes in my adolescence I start realizing that I have something personal that I really want to dig in. Besides every information that I got from the outside world, I felt there was something, that I needed to share, which it was a little bit more personal on the side of that, and I kept working on it, and therefore I developed, my own style, my own sound, not only in drumming but also in my writing, and also in the books per se. I mean, to me, it's all an act of creativity, and what inspired me the most is that ability of creating something from nothing, or creating something from the same raw material that we might all have, but creating something that is particularly very defined and focused on what you're really interested. And that's, some of the things that I also relate to my students many times, and hopefully I'll be able to relate that through my drumming and music as well.
And what are the things that keep you going, like that purpose? I mean, we all have. We eventually, as we move, I shouldn't say move on, as we mature in our mindset, I think things happen to us, and then you find a bigger purpose. Like what fuels you? What fuels each one of us has our own story about that. But what is it in your own journey that keeps that going and pushes you to the next? What is it? What's going on here?
It becomes more. At this moment, it becomes more like a necessity than a purpose. The purpose, I am on it. The purpose is to develop, create, and in a way reshape. From the vast amount of information, trying to put it in a way that creates new sensations, a new story, a personal journey that many people might not be exposed to. One of the things that always strike me about arts and music in general, still is the unpredictability. To me, the level of surprise and the level of I'm listening to something that I know a few things that are in there, but the whole story is unique and is fresh and is personal, and it has a complete different journey all around in terms of what is going in the music, and that really is a big motivation for me. Now, in the bottom of all of that, it has become, because it becomes a habit, it becomes a necessity at some point. So many times I actually say, let's say that I have a day off or something, that I am at the house, and I say, well, today I'm not doing any of this. So I go, I watch my day, I have breakfast and I just automatically go to my studio and start doing what I said I'm not going to do. And it's like, this is unbelievable. I'm just sitting here, or either in the piano, writing some music, or working on something. It's like, I just said that I was not going to do that. So it becomes something that is bigger than yourself, that almost it tells you the level of dedication and love that you have to give in order to develop all of this.
Interesting. That's an interesting approach. So you're being pushed. I mean, I totally understand what you mean, because the closer you get, no, I shouldn't say closer. The more at ease you are with the things that you do, all of a sudden you discover something else, or you're seeing something. It's like the doctor or the researcher getting closer to finding the answer to a particular medical problem or a research problem, and you're seeing something different, but you didn't do it on purpose. I mean,
no, it was a combination. As I say, it's never only one thing. It's a combination of a few things. Of course, I've been experiencing that since I am a kid. I mean, to me, there are these two big approaches when it comes to arts and specifically music. Is this generic way, which is, the knowledge per se, which is generic, is in a sense of anybody who wants and would like to can access to that. And then the other thing is the personal and particular, the individual thing. And since I was a kid, I realized that I don't only like the instrument, but who's behind it. Like, what's the story behind? Like, let's say I like Changuito, right? It is one of my biggest inspiration. But Changuito plays the timbales, but that doesn't mean that I like the timbales per se. I like when he plays the timbales. So that makes it very personal and very particular because he has his own vocabulary within that context, right? So it's the same thing happens with generic, like people ask me many times, oh, you like jazz? It's like, well, you can say that in a sense, I like jazz, but there is a lot of music out there that is considered jazz that I'm not really fond, and so what I'm saying is like that there is this level of individuality and personalization. I like to call it personalization of sound. It's the individual where at some point you make only one stroke and say, okay, that's this guy. Just one. You don't even have to play a whole bar. Just a feel, people will recognize you. And that always has motivated me because I think there is something really valuable in that. And, when you comes to the side of the generic thing, I always say people many times assume that music comes out of trees and comes out of avocados. It's like, no, there are musicians behind with names. And when you come to the realm of music, and especially when you come to the subject of tradition, which I've gone really deep into this philosophical, concepts in a way, because tradition is really a concept in our mind. Because the only thing that separates tradition is an invisible line of a concept. Because where does tradition start and where does it end? Nobody knows. What does that really mean? That we framing tradition as a past events of things that had happened in the past, and we frame them and we frozen them in time. Right? Separately from the ones that we live now. So all of that questioning and critical thinking behind what we do have really give me also the courage to do what I do and the inspiration to do what I do. Because I'm very self-critical thinking. You can tell me right now, you have to listen to this drummer. He's a great drummer in the world, and I hear you, but I'm not going to believe you until that is meant to. It means to me what it probably means to you. So that's, in a way, it's inside my genes. It's the critical thinking and the critical analyzation and the creativity, I think, comes from that. I think part of the creativity, in a way, is also an insatisfaction of what is out there, subconsciously, in a way. So you want to create something that you want to be heard, not only for the selfishness of putting my name on it, but because you believe that something else can be done, and it should have the same value as everything else.
Right. And it becomes like a duty almost. Like now you have a certain understanding, and you're the person that can do this. Just because you know that if you don't do it, then it's lost.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
They're answering the question of the purpose.
No, that's very interesting because, I mean, people like, Miles, people like even Santana himself. I mean, he plays two notes and you know exactly who it is. And Tony Williams or Changuito, of course. I had my own experiences with Changuito. I knew he played some drums, but we had him at Cosa. I mean, you've been at Cosa, and I purposely went to his house. This is a long time ago when we first started, and I brought him to the States through Canada. It was really complicated back then, and he was with us for a whole week. Imagine, Horacio was there, Jim Chapin was there, he was there. But I had to have him there because I said, the whole Cosa idea was how all the best people, the best minds to be in one place, and that was the whole idea behind it. And I asked him one day, I said, we went through a lot of trouble to get you here because this is a place for us to see you in our context. But I said, I'd like to have a drum lesson with you. So I took a drum lesson, I recorded it. Of course, he totally demolished me in that hour because I couldn't understand half of it. It was just too mind-bending, and I'm saying, where does this come from? Like, you can't study this stuff. And he had these concepts that were just so interesting, but I was not ready for it. I mean, you need certain preparation to be able to do certain things, either mentally or technically.
Right.
And so I recorded it. Fortunately, later on, I transcribed some of those things that he gave me. They're in my book. So finally, I was able to do them, and then I said, I have to put this down. But also, he was doing some things. He was playing some things that even back then I could not understand. And when he played his own concert, and I still to this day, I've spoken to him on occasion about it, and he said, you have to come back and we'll, I'll show you some other things. But people like that who have some kind of, I shouldn't say development of some concept, but sometimes you say, where did that come from? Like Miles or Changuito, he wasn't like somebody showed him something. They developed it. I mean, does that question come up to you? Say, like, where does this thing that made it so different and so amazing? And it's not just one or two things. Is this place, right?
Yeah, as I say, as you go through life, your level of commitment, how much of that cultural heritage in a way becomes part of you, and how much you feel like you're able or you're ready in a way to deal with it and play with information and personalize that sound and just understand that art is about the story. And we have all these tools and we have all this raw information. We have this, but we as musicians and artists, we manipulate sounds. This is our job: manipulate sounds. We can get. I've seen a lot of people that have a great deal of information, like playing, and they're not able to develop a personal sound because it hasn't gotten. I guess it's a combination of a lot of things. It's hard to judge that, and I'm not the best person to judge this kind of thing. I just give you somehow an insight of what I think about when I think about the subjects. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think each of us also come here with a purpose, and we kind of you kind of feel it, and then you make that decision. Does it really, the purpose that I've been called resonates with what I really want to do? And therefore you take it to the next level, and then that becomes part of your life. This is your life. Yeah, I'm thinking on rhythm in this case. Anytime. This is for me not a job. It's a style. It's a way of living. So I'm in the shower. I'm chuckling my teeth, doing something. I'm talking to someone else that I'm not interested. I'm already practicing in my head something. But it becomes a habit. It's a constant development, and therefore, is in a way developing constantly in different levels. So I think that helps a lot to make that. Now, there are different perspectives to that, ways you can see it from the inside. Then you start seeing the feedback of people, of how they actually interact with what you're offering. And that helps also to identify, there is a lot of things in my playing that I'm not consciously aware of it. And then some people come after the concert or show something and they say, oh man, this thing that you did is like, what thing? It's like, this thing that you just did is like, oh. So at that moment, that becomes much more aware. I say, oh, maybe I can actually develop that thing that he just said that I was doing, that I was not completely aware. I can develop it because I have the tools to do that. And so it's a combination of a lot of things, but I will say discipline, commitment, passion, love, and just a giving. To give yourself, you give your life to it. You become that. It's one thing. It's just, similarly, it's just the whole is one thing together.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and that's wow, a great way to end that story for now. but but thank you. That's honestly that's a great summary of direction, and I think it's beautiful. And I hope anybody listening can take a moment of reflection to that. I think it's great, and I want to thank you for saying that. And I'm looking forward to checking out your new book for sure. I'm the curious guy. I want to know, I want to see, and I want to be intrigued, and I'm
I'd
curious.
love to send you a copy. I send you a copy right after this conversation.
Right. Well, thank you, sir. But before, as I mean, this we can go on for weeks, of course, but and we maybe should one day. But I really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your shaping your journey with us. And as I always say, to be continued.